My daughter looked me dead in the eyes and screamed, "You embarrassed me. You don't deserve to be part of my life anymore." That moment, it broke something inside me. I had raised her, loved her, sacrificed everything for her future, and yet, standing there in her mansion, in front of her wealthy friends, I was treated like dirt. I remember my hands trembling as she shoved me toward the door. Her husband, instead of calming her down, stood smirking, as if throwing me out was the highlight of his evening. "Go back to your small house, old man," he sneered. "You don't belong in this world." I didn't even realize tears were streaming down my face. My own daughter, the child whose diapers I had changed, whose schooling I had worked 2 jobs to pay for, was now humiliated to be seen with me. But what she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the house she was boasting about wasn't even hers. The mansion, the land, the investments, they were all still in my name. For years I had kept silent, letting her believe she had control, letting her flaunt a life built on my sacrifices. But in that moment of betrayal, something inside me shifted. I knew what I had to do. That night, I drove straight to my lawyer's office, my hand still shaking, my heart still heavy, but my mind sharper than ever. We sat down, drew up new papers, and changed everything. The daughter who screamed that I embarrassed her would never see a dime of my inheritance. Instead, I left it all, every property, every bank account, every investment, to someone she never expected, her cousin. And when the truth finally came out, when the will was read, the look on her face. It was the moment I realized that sometimes the only way to teach respect is through silence and a signature. I suppose to truly understand the betrayal, I need to take you back. My name is Abdul, though my family always just called me Abba. I grew up poor, worked my entire life with my bare hands, and managed to build something, a small business, some land, and eventually a few properties. Nothing was handed to me. Every brick, every rupee came from sweat and sacrifice. My wife, Salma, passed away nearly 10 years ago. She was the glue that held this family together. After she left, I thought my children would rally around me, but instead, cracks began to show. I have 2 children, my daughter, Ayesha, and my son, Bilal. On the outside, they were both successful. Ayesha married into wealth. Her husband, Imran, had family money, a sharp tongue, and an ego even larger than his expensive cars. Bilal, on the other hand, wasn't flashy. He worked a modest job, lived a quiet life, and never asked much of me. Then there was my late brother's daughter, my niece, Hina. She had lost her parents young, and though she wasn't my child by blood, she was family in every way that mattered. She would often stop by with groceries, sit with me, and actually listen when I spoke. She treated me like a father, not a burden. But Ayesha, my own daughter, things were different with her. She loved appearances. She loved the idea of being above others, and she slowly began to see me as someone who didn't fit into the world she was building. She didn't say it outright in the beginning, but the signs were always there, the way she'd roll her eyes at my old clothes, the way she'd hurry me out of sight when her friends came over, the way her tone shifted when her husband was around. And I foolishly ignored it. I told myself, she's just stressed, she's just proud, she's still my daughter. But deep inside, a father always knows when love begins to turn into embarrassment. One evening, when I showed up to her house unannounced simply to drop off some sweets, she met me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Abba, next time, just call first, okay?" It was a simple sentence. But I swear to you, the sting of it stayed with me for weeks, because in that moment I realized I was no longer truly welcome in my own daughter's home, and that was only the beginning. After that day, I noticed things more clearly. Maybe I had been blind before, but once the veil lifted, I couldn't ignore them anymore. When Ayesha and Imran invited me to dinner, I always felt like a guest, not family. I would sit quietly, listening as they and their friends boasted about vacations in Dubai, shopping trips in London, and investments in properties I'd never even heard of. Once, during dinner, one of Imran's friends asked him where he got the funds to start his business. Imran smirked, raised his glass, and said, "Hard work and connections, of course." I almost choked on my food. Connections, the truth was, it was my loan, my life savings that gave him his start. He had begged me years ago, promised he would return it, and I gave it to him because he was marrying my daughter. But now, in front of everyone, he erased me from the story completely. I looked at Ayesha, expecting her to speak up, to at least acknowledge what I had done. But she just laughed and nodded along, proud of her husband's success. That night, as we drove home, Bilal said quietly, "Abba, why do you let them talk like that?" I didn't answer him, because deep down, I didn't know. Was it because I still loved her too much, or was it because I was afraid to lose her completely if I spoke the truth? But Ayesha's words and actions began cutting deeper. She once scolded me in front of her children, my own grandchildren, telling me not to confuse them with my old stories. Another time, she mocked my clothes in front of her in-laws, saying, "Abba is simple. He doesn't understand these things." Every word was like a blade, sharper than anything life had ever thrown at me. I had faced poverty, hunger, loss, but nothing hurt like seeing my daughter ashamed of me. Still, I swallowed it all. A father's heart is foolish that way. We forgive even when we shouldn't. But the day came when her disrespect wasn't just quiet mockery. It turned into something I could never forget. It was at a grand dinner party. Ayesha and Imran had invited dozens of guests to their mansion. Business partners, friends, wealthy families. Everyone dressed in fine clothes, sipping wine, speaking English words I barely understood. I had dressed in my best, a simple shalwar kameez, freshly ironed, the same one I had worn to Bilal's graduation years ago. To me, it was special, but to them, it was a joke. As I entered the room, I could already hear the whispers. Some guests glanced at me, then at Ayesha, as if questioning why this old man was even there. I sat quietly at the table, trying not to disturb anyone. But then, as the evening went on, someone made a remark something cruel. A man laughed and asked loudly, "Is this your driver, Ayesha?" The table erupted in laughter. My ears burned, my heart pounded. I wanted to disappear, but what broke me wasn't the man's words. It was my daughter's reaction. She laughed too, not just a nervous laugh, not a polite chuckle. She threw her head back and laughed, as if she agreed. And then, when I tried to stand and excuse myself, she hissed under her breath, "Please, Abba, don't embarrass me tonight." That sentence, that look in her eyes, it was the first time I truly felt like a stranger to my own child. And as I walked out of that dining hall, humiliated in front of dozens, I swore to myself something had to change, but I had no idea then just how deep her betrayal would cut. After that humiliating dinner, I tried to keep my distance. I spent more time with Bilal, who never made me feel unwanted, and with Hina, who treated me like her own father. But Ayesha and Imran, they didn't stop. In fact, their behavior grew worse. One afternoon, Imran came to visit me. He didn't bring the kids, not even Ayesha. He came alone, dressed in an expensive suit, and sat across from me in my modest living room. "Uncle," he began, his tone too smooth, too rehearsed. "You know Ayesha and I have plans. Big plans. We want to expand our businesses, buy more property, secure a future for the children." I nodded slowly, waiting for the real reason he came. And then it came. "You have those properties in your name, the land, the shops, the house in Lahore. Honestly, Uncle, they would be better managed under us. You should sign them over, it's practical. At your age, it's just a burden." My chest tightened. I stared at him, stunned. He wasn't even asking politely. He was demanding. I worked my whole life for those. I said quietly, "Yes, of course." He replied quickly, "And we're grateful. But don't you want your daughter to be comfortable? Don't you want your grandchildren to have security?" I realized then this wasn't just about comfort. This was greed, plain and simple. I told him I'd think about it, but inside, my answer was already no. A week later, Ayesha herself came, and she wasn't sweet, she wasn't gentle. "Abba," she said firmly, "Imran is right. It's time you transferred the papers. You don't need all this property. We'll take care of it. You trust me, don't you?" Her eyes, the same eyes that once looked at me with love when she was a child, now looked at me with calculation. I didn't argue, I didn't fight, but my silence seemed to irritate her. "Don't make this difficult," she said coldly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how my daughter had turned into someone who saw me not as a father, but as an obstacle. And deep down, I knew This was only the beginning of her demands, and I was right. Confused and uneasy, I went to see my lawyer, Mr. Rahman. He had handled my affairs for years, ever since I bought my first property. A sharp man in his 50s, but also someone who cared for me like a younger brother. I told him everything: the pressure, the meetings, the demand to sign. He listened quietly, nodding, his brows furrowing deeper with every word. Finally, he leaned forward and said, "Don't sign anything." I blinked, but they are my children. They're also ambitious. He interrupted firmly. An ambition without gratitude is dangerous. If you sign, Abdul, you will have nothing left. They will push you aside completely. I've seen this happen before. His words hit me hard. He was right. I had seen how Ayesha already treated me like a burden. What would happen if she and Imran had everything? Would I even have a place in their home? Mr. Rahman leaned back, his voice softer now. Keep control, at least until you're gone. If they respect you, they will wait. If they don't, then they don't deserve it. I walked out of his office with my head spinning. The thought of my daughter using me, lying to me, even erasing me from my own properties, it felt like poison in my veins. That night, Bilal came over. He found me sitting on the veranda, lost in thought. "What's wrong, Abba?" he asked. I sighed. "Your sister. She wants me to sign everything over." His face darkened. "Don't do it. Please, she doesn't. She doesn't see things the way I do." I looked at him, at his worried face, and realized something painful. One child wanted to take everything from me, and the other was begging me to hold on. But it wasn't Bilal's words or even Mr. Rahman's that made me decide. It was what happened at Ayesha's party soon after the night she screamed at me, the night she tore the last thread that tied us together. It was her anniversary party, a lavish celebration in their mansion, decorated with lights that must have cost more than my yearly income in my younger days. I didn't want to go. My heart told me it would end badly. But Bilal insisted. "Abba, you should go. You're her father. Maybe she'll remember that tonight." So I dressed again in my best shalwar kameez, polished my old shoes, and went. At first, things were civil. I greeted people, tried to smile, stayed quiet in the corner. But then, something happened that shattered me completely. A guest, perhaps drunk, perhaps just cruel, made a remark about me. "Isn't that the old man who still lives in that tiny house? Strange that he's here with people like us." The room chuckled. My ears burned. But before I could even open my mouth, my daughter turned, her face red with embarrassment, and shouted at me, "Abba, please just stop embarrassing me. Why do you have to act like this? You don't belong here." Her words echoed in my chest like gunfire. Every person in that room turned to stare. My own daughter, screaming at me, disowning me in front of strangers. I stood frozen, my throat closed. I couldn't even defend myself. And then Imran added with that same cruel smirk, "Maybe it's better if you leave, uncle. This isn't your world." The guests whispered. Some laughed. I couldn't stay. My legs carried me out of that mansion, into the night air, my chest heavy, my eyes wet. I had faced humiliation before, but never from my own child. That was the night I died as a father and was reborn as a man who finally saw the truth. When I reached home, I didn't hesitate. I called Mr. Rahman. "Prepare the papers." I said through clenched teeth, "I'm changing everything." And that was the beginning of the end for Ayesha. The night of that party, I barely slept. Every word Ayesha shouted still echoed in my ears. "You don't belong here." For years I had ignored the signs, excused her cruelty, told myself she would change. But that night, something in me hardened. I wasn't just an old man to be discarded. I was her father, and if she couldn't see that, then she didn't deserve the fruits of my lifetime of labor. The next morning, I drove straight to Mr. Rahman's office. My hands were still trembling, but my voice was steady. "Draw up a new will," I said. He looked at me carefully as though weighing the pain behind my words. "Are you sure, Abdul? This isn't something you can take back easily." "I am sure," I replied. "My daughter, she has chosen her pride over her father. Let her live with that choice." We spent hours going through the details. Property deeds, bank accounts, business shares, everything I had worked decades to build. He laid it all out, and I signed page after page, feeling as though I was rewriting my life story with every stroke of the pen. But the most important part was this: not a single penny, not a single brick, would go to Ayesha or Imran. Instead, everything would go to someone else, someone who had shown me kindness, not contempt. When I left the office that day, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of losing Ayesha, because now she had already lost me, but the question remained, who would I entrust with everything? People might think I chose Bilal, my son, and truthfully, I considered it. He was loyal, respectful, never greedy. But I also knew Bilal was content with his modest life. He never cared for riches or properties. Then there was Hina, my niece. She had no wealth, no husband, no glamorous mansion to her name. But what she did have was a heart. Whenever she visited me, she'd bring tea, sit beside me, and ask about my health. She never mocked my clothes, never rushed me out the door. In her eyes, I wasn't a burden, I was family. One evening, I called her over. She came quickly, concerned by the heaviness in my voice. Hina, I said, my throat tightening, if one day all that I have becomes yours, what would you do with it? Her eyes widened. Uncle, why would you even ask me that? Everything you have, it's yours. It should be Ayesha's or Bilal's. Answer me. I pressed gently. She looked down, thoughtful. If it were mine, I would use it to take care of you, and then I'd build a school for children who don't have chances like I didn't, so no one has to struggle the way we did. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. In that moment, I knew my decision was right. The will was changed. My inheritance would belong to Hina. And while Ayesha paraded in her mansion, believing she owned the world, she had no idea that the very foundation under her feet was already slipping away. But fate has a way of bringing truth out at the most dramatic moment. The weeks after I signed the will were almost surreal. Ayesha continued to live in her bubble of arrogance. She threw parties, boasted about her mansion, and mocked others for having less. I went once just to see her. She greeted me coldly, introducing me to her friends as my father. He's retired. No mention of how her husband's empire started with my money. No recognition of my sacrifices. But instead of anger, I felt something strange that day. A quiet satisfaction. Because while she boasted about her wealth, I held the secret in my heart. None of it was hers. When Imran talked about buying another property, I smiled faintly, knowing he had no idea the deeds were still under my name. When Ayesha bragged about her inheritance, I simply nodded. My lips sealed while inside I was thinking, your arrogance will be your undoing. Bilal noticed my calmness. One evening he asked Abba, why are you so quiet these days? You don't seem hurt anymore. I looked at him and said softly, because the truth has a way of finding its own time. And when it comes, Ayesha will see. And as I spoke, I realized something. The day of truth was closer than I thought, because life is unpredictable, and my health, though I rarely admitted it, was beginning to falter. And when I finally collapsed one evening, clutching my chest, the stage was set for inheritance reveal that would shatter everything. It happened suddenly. One evening, as I was sitting on the veranda sipping tea, a sharp pain shot through my chest. My cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the ground. The world around me blurred, my breath came in short gasps, and all I could think was, so this is it. Bilal rushed me to the hospital. For days I drifted in and out of consciousness, hearing voices around me, doctors, nurses, and the worried murmurs of my family. But here's the truth, they weren't all worried for me. When Ayesha came to the hospital, her first words weren't about my health. She whispered to Imran, loud enough for me to hear even in my weak state. We should ask about the papers. If Abba dies without transferring them, it'll be complicated. Even in that moment, when I was lying between life and death, all she cared about was property, not me, not her father. Bilal noticed too. His fists clenched as he overheard. Later, he whispered to me, don't worry, Abba. They won't get what they want. I couldn't speak much, but I looked at him, and my eyes must have said enough, because he gave me a small nod, as if he already knew the truth I had been keeping. After a week, I was discharged. My health was fragile, but my mind was sharp, and when Mr. Rahman suggested it was time to finalize the paperwork for my estate in case the worst happened, I agreed. The family was summoned. Ayesha, Imran, Bilal, and Hina all gathered at my house. They thought it was just routine. They thought they knew what was coming. They were wrong, very wrong. We all sat in the living room. The air was thick with tension. Ayesha sat tall, dressed in her expensive clothes, Imran at her side smirking confidently. Bilal sat quietly, his hands folded, while Hina looked nervous, unsure why she had even been called. Mr. Rahman opened his briefcase, pulled out documents, and cleared his throat. As per Abdul Sahib's instructions, I will now read his final will and testament. I watched my daughter's face as she leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. She was already picturing herself as the new queen of my properties. The lawyer began. I, Abdul, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this my last will. I leave my estate, including all properties, accounts, and assets, not to my daughter Ayesha or her husband Imran. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Ayesha blinked, her smile faltered, Imran's jaw tightened. Instead, I leave everything to my niece, Hina. Silence, a heavy, unbearable silence, and then chaos. What? Ayesha shrieked, shooting to her feet. This must be a mistake. Read it again. Imran grabbed the papers, scanning them desperately, as if his eyes could rewrite the words. This is fraud. You can't do this, but Mr. Rahman remained calm. The will is legally signed and registered. Every asset is now Hina's. All eyes turned to Hina, who sat frozen, her hands trembling. Uncle, why me? She whispered. I looked at her, my voice weak but steady. Because you respected me. When my own daughter did not, the room erupted. Ayesha screamed, Imran cursed, Bilal tried to calm things, and Hina sat in stunned silence. And in the middle of it all, I sat quietly, watching years of greed and arrogance collapse in a single moment. But it wasn't over, because my daughter, my own flesh and blood, turned her fury not just on me, but on everyone around her. A niece. Ayesha screamed, her voice shaking the walls. You left everything to a niece. What about me? I'm your daughter. I'm your blood. Her face twisted in rage, and for the first time, I saw her clearly, not as the little girl I had raised, but as the greedy woman she had become. Imran stepped forward, pointing a finger at me. This isn't right, old man. You can't humiliate us like this, after everything we've done for you. I laughed bitterly. Done for me? You mocked me. You threw me out of your home. You told me I didn't belong. And now you expect me to reward you for that. Ayesha's voice cracked. You embarrassed me. I only wanted to protect my reputation. My heart ached, but I didn't flinch, and I only wanted a daughter who respected her father. But I lost her long ago. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of anger at losing what she thought was hers. Bilal finally stood. Enough, Ayesha. Enough, Imran. Abba made his choice, and if you can't accept it, then maybe you don't deserve to be here either. For a moment the room was silent, and then Ayesha screamed one final time. You'll regret this, Abba. You'll regret choosing her over your own daughter. She stormed out, dragging Imran with her, their voices echoing down the hall. The house fell quiet. Only Hina's soft sobs remained as she whispered, Uncle, I don't deserve this. I reached for her hand. You deserve more than you know. Because respect, child, is worth more than any fortune. And in that moment, I knew my decision had broken my daughter's pride, but it had also secured a legacy that would finally be honored. And yet, Ayesha's downfall was only just beginning. After that day, things changed, not just for me, but for Ayesha. Word spread quickly in the family and among her social circle. People who once clung to her, dazzled by her wealth and status, began to whisper behind her back. They had seen her scream at her father. They had seen her lose everything in one blow. Imran tried to fight the will. Mr. Rahman had prepared everything perfectly. The documents were airtight. Every property, every account, every investment all belonged to Hina now. Without those assets, Imran's empire began to crumble. Loans piled up, investors backed out, and the friends, who once filled their house with laughter, suddenly disappeared. Ayesha tried to maintain her pride. She still dressed in her designer clothes, still tried to throw small gatherings, but people stopped coming. One by one, her so-called friends abandoned her, and then came the day when even her mansion, the one she flaunted, one she had humiliated me in, had to be sold. I didn't see it myself, but Bilal told me. They moved out quietly, Abba. No one helped them pack. No one even cared. The irony was bitter. The very world she had chosen over her father, the glittering parties, The false respect of wealthy friends was the first to betray her when the money ran dry. And as for me, I didn't feel joy. I didn't laugh at her downfall. I only felt the hollow ache of a father whose daughter had chosen pride over love. But there was also something else, peace, because I knew the lesson had finally been written into her life in a way she could never ignore. Respect cannot be bought, and without it, even the richest life crumbles to dust. While Ayesha fell, Hina rose not in arrogance, not in pride, but in quiet dignity. She inherited everything, yes, but she never flaunted it. The very first thing she did was come to me, tears in her eyes. "Uncle," she said softly, "I don't want this for myself. I want this to honor you." And she kept her word. She took care of me as if I were her own father. She managed the properties with fairness, rebuilt my small business, and even set aside funds for Bill to live more comfortably. But what touched me most was what she did next. She opened a school in our town, a simple building painted bright white, filled with children who had nothing. And above its entrance she placed a plaque that read, "In loving memory of Abdul, who believed respect matters more than money." When she showed it to me, I couldn't hold back my tears. My wife, Salma, would have been proud. This was the legacy we dreamed of, not wealth, not status, but kindness passed forward. In Hina's eyes, I found the daughterly love I had lost. She filled the empty space Ayesha left behind, not with riches, but with respect. And in those quiet evenings, as we shared tea on the veranda, I realized something important. Family is not about blood. It is about who stands beside you when the world turns away. The last time I saw Ayesha, it wasn't at a party or a grand mansion. It was on a quiet street, her clothes simpler now, her face lined with the weight of regret. She didn't speak to me. She only glanced my way, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Shame, perhaps, or maybe sorrow. But she walked on without a word, and I didn't chase her. My heart had broken too many times already. I went home that night, sat with Bilal and Hina, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years, because I finally understood. I had done what was right. For too long, I had believed that blood alone demanded loyalty, that because she was my daughter, I owed her everything. But the truth is harsher and simpler. Respect is the true currency of family. Without it, money is meaningless. Without it, love cannot survive. So I leave this story for anyone listening, for any parent, any child, anyone who thinks wealth will last longer than respect. Learn from my mistake, because my daughter screamed that I embarrassed her, and so I left everything to her cousin. And today, as I sit in peace, I can say this with certainty. Respect matters more than money, and now they know it too.